I think the problem was that the police created a very tense situation in the first place. They had banned a march. So the organizers wanted to march from one district to another, but the police banned that, said, no, you have to be confined to this small area. And then people started showing up to that area. It proceeded pretty smoothly for about an hour. And it was very peaceful inside the venue. And then suddenly the police grabbed the mic and then announced that the rally had to end. And then this caused quite a lot of unhappiness about amongst the protesters because the scene was entirely peaceful. And then there was some dispute over the policeman's refusal to show his ID. That dispute lasted for about 5 minutes. And then suddenly, without any warning at all, the police then fired a tear gas into the crowd, which was made of entirely unarmed, many elderly people. And then that caused a huge panic and almost resulted in a stampede with everyone panicking and running away.
I'm just thinking about your word dispute there between the police and also the protesters on the stage, because several reports have said actually that there was violence from the protesters towards the policemen making that statement. I guess when there are stories like that, I mean, I've got the government statement here and they've said often rioters use peaceful public assemblies as a cover for vandalism and attacks. Would you agree with that sentiment, that there are some individuals who then taint it for everybody else?
I've seen the reports subsequently that there were some, for example, there were some protesters in another street who were setting blockades, which then led the police to terminate the rally. But I think the problem is that the police seem to have this habit of focusing on very few disruptive protesters, and then using that as a reason or an excuse to ban or disperse or use tear gas on the majority of the protesters, which then results in the chaotic scenes we see. So they've
what's
handled
the strategy
it in a way,
here from the perspective of the protesters? Because it's been months. I mean, this started back in March last year, and there has been concessions from the government. The extradition bill was scrapped. But as far as the protesters go, Carrie Lam has said publicly several times there will be no more movement from their perspective. So what's the strategy next? Because there doesn't seem to be much that the protesters are actually achieving in terms of getting any legal change.
Of course, Carrie Lam will refuse to make any concessions. She refused to make any concessions for the extradition bill until pressure was put on her. I think the most immediate aim is really to get the independent inquiry into the police actions. As you said, there's many events where the government has a story and then there's another story that's seen from the people. And the way to really restore confidence in the government or the police is to have an independent inquiry into the rights and wrongs of those incidents. And we've seen increasing pressure more and more from international perspective, but also domestic elements like the Hong Kong Bar Association recently released a paper on that.
So what is the strategy to try and get this independent inquiry forward? Is it going to be continued pressure of protests on the streets as your main strategy and course of action?
I think there's the continued protests on the streets. But one of the themes of the rally yesterday was really a call for international support. And we've seen the movement towards Magnitsky-type sanctions, most notably in the US, of course, with the Hong Kong Human Rights Act. But other countries are also beginning to think of that. For example, Australia, their parliament is having an inquiry this month on whether to enact Magnitsky-type legislation. So I think that will be one of the focuses of the protests, to have international pressure, including the use of sanctions.